Today, EA and DICE announced that the open beta for Star Wars Battlefront 2 will commence on October 6th and run until the 9th. And if you like, you can actually pre-order the game and get early access to the beta. Pre-ordering on PS4, Xbox, or PC is going to get you into the open beta, well, the closed beta at that point, I suppose, on the 4th of October. So that's a 2-day head start on everybody else. I was lucky. I had the chance to go to E3 this year and go hands-on with Star Wars Battlefront 2 for about an hour, actually, and I was playing with YouTubers like Muselk and Jack Frags and Doom49 and all these other people, and I gotta say, I was super impressed with Star Wars Battlefront 2. The quick story is that I was super disappointed with Star Wars Battlefront 1 because I was a huge fan of the original series, and this was a huge departure from that. Furthermore, the game was just not a particularly well-designed game. In particular, the weapon design was very weak. It felt like you were shooting toys, and a lot of the map design was just very frustrating, creating these huge open areas where you could just get sniped out of nowhere constantly. It just wasn't a well-constructed shooter. So I was a little bit skeptical going into Star Wars Battlefront 2, but EA had made a really big deal during their press conference about the fact that they had listened to fan feedback about the first game, and they were very keen to get it right. The first announcement that they made, which was very encouraging, is that there's not going to be any more DLC map packs. One of the biggest things that killed the hype for the original Star Wars Battlefront was the fact that, well, you really only got 4 areas, which is a very small amount of content, and then to be able to access the rest of the game, you needed to spend $60 on map packs that very few people were actually doing. So even if you did have those map packs after spending that money, you really couldn't find that many people to play with. Certainly in Australia, it was very hard to find players on those servers very soon after the game went live. So they made some big commercial mistakes with the launch, and the fact that EA have said now that all maps will be free to all players is a huge step forward for the franchise, and immediately made me pay a lot more attention to what they were talking about. It must be said that there is a very controversial loot crate system going into the game. Loot crates essentially will drop cards, and the cards can be used in-game for power-ups. A lot of people are calling it pay to win, and I totally get that. I haven't seen the system in action yet. No one really knows how they're going to balance the economy of these loot drops in the future. It's really easy to assume the worst and think that EA are going to do terrible things to us, but at the same time, they've actually been making some very pro-consumer choices lately, particularly Titanfall DLC all being free, and the recent announcement here of all DLC map packs being free as well. So while the final economy tuning of these loot boxes is still a big question mark, I can tell you that the core game itself has been significantly improved in almost every single way. The most notable change is that now they have adopted a class-based system. There were 4 classes available when I played it, and I think that's also what will ship with the game. There's the Assault class, which is a basic sort of infantry type. There's the Heavy class, which is obviously packing heavy weapons and shields. There's a Specialist class, which is more sniper focused. And there's also an Officer class, who's focused on buffing allies and deploying turrets. The foundation for each class's abilities and weapons are essentially cards. Each card relates to a specific weapon or ability, so while I might have the ability to rally the troops around me as an officer and buff their damage and increase their survivability, another ability on the Assault will be just pulling out a shotgun and using that. So switching weapons is inextricably linked to your ability slots. That is the way that the game handles that mechanic. You can of course change your main weapon as well. You can mix that up as well as changing up your abilities. So not only do you have these classes as a base, but you also have the ability to customize them, which I think is a really nice change. It adds a layer of depth and complexity to this game, but as I said, I really do want to stress this is a casual, relaxed shooter. Don't expect a huge amount of strategic depth. This description of the classes is going to feel very familiar to anyone that's ever played any of the Battlefield games. Battlefield obviously has different classes for each types of soldier. Within that, you can customize their loadouts, which essentially give you different abilities as you go through. It's a model that DICE, the developers of both Star Wars Battlefront and Battlefield, have been using for a number of years. I'm a huge fan of it personally, so I see no reason why it wouldn't be a success here as well. As I mentioned, one of my biggest disappointments with Star Wars Battlefront 1 was the weapon design, and I can say confidently that that things are a lot better this time around. I used a variety of blasters like sidearm blasters and assault rifle blasters and sniper rifle blasters and heavy machine gun blasters and all that sort of stuff while I was playing, and each of the weapons had a very distinct feel. There was a definite skill cap associated with them, as they now have recoil and they now have reticle bloom in the appropriate proportions. It definitely feels like I'm firing a proper weapon rather than just a toy. This is obviously a really big deal for any shooter fan. The weapon needs to feel right when you're firing it, and it definitely felt right this time around. It also was really good to see how they handled the special power weapons or ability weapons that you pull out. When I pulled out a shotgun, I only have 2 shots with that thing and they need to count. So when I did pull it out and I did land those shots, it felt right. Those things dealt a lot of damage, and it really felt like those weapons earned their slot on my ability list. The map design was also a significant improvement. So the first thing I'll say is that this mission you're seeing here is on Naboo, obviously, from episode 1. This is one of the most spectacular looking games ever. Yes, I did just blow myself up with a grenade then. This is one of the most spectacular looking games I've ever played. It uses EA's Frostbite engine, and what these guys continue to do with this engine always astounds me. It's almost indistinguishable from watching the film, especially if you look at the aerial combat scenes. They just look amazing. Flying over the top of Naboo like that is just like next level, and I constantly found myself just in awe of how good this game looks. Even inside you can see the polished marble finishings really just popping up, an individual blaster fire shining off each part of the marble. Like, it's just astounding what goes into the visual quality of this game. If there's one thing that Star Wars Battlefront 1 got right, it was its tremendously faithful visual and audio recreation of the Star Wars universe. It really does feel like you're in your own personal little Star Wars story when you're playing this game. That part hasn't changed a bit. It just happens to be a much more fun game while you're doing it. On the level design itself, I was really struck by how interesting and different each phase of the advance was. When we were outside, we were escorting that big armored vehicle. We basically needed to keep it safe as it approached the palace so it could kind of knock down the front door. And once we get inside, things really change. With its tight corridors and deliberate choke points, it really reminded me a lot of Battlefield Operation Locker or Metro maps, where you have 64 people playing, 32 people lining up on either side of some narrow choke point waiting for the other side to make some sort of mistake. I know a lot of people don't really like that style of play, but I personally do. It's just kind of fun, but I really feel like it goes to that very casual focus that I alluded to earlier. If they were looking for this to be a far more strategic game, they wouldn't give these narrow choke points like this that just really rely on people standing on either side, firing their weapons through and throwing grenades. That's not the intent here. The intent is just to create big, exciting moments with lots of explosions and people daringly running through like heroes, hoping that they can make an advance. That's what this game is all about, and the map design actually delivers on that really well. One of the things that really attracts people to Star Wars Battlefront is the idea that you get to play as the various heroes. You're seeing Darth Maul running around here, you'll see Rey very soon, you'll see Boba Fett in a bit as well. Yes, you do get to occupy the role of various heroes throughout the game, and it was the best and worst part of Star Wars Battlefront 2 as I was playing it. The way the system works is that you essentially accumulate points, which you'll see down the bottom of the screen. At the moment, I've got 192 battle points right now, and I can choose to spend those on various pickups. So for example, I could choose to spend them on an air fighter, or I could buy a tank, or I could buy one of those mech droids that you saw just a second ago. And if I save up a lot of them, I can choose a hero, and I can spawn in as Darth Maul or Boba Fett or whoever else. The thing is though, you can only have one Darth Maul on the battlefield at any point in time, and Darth Maul is really, really strong. So the person who's controlling him, if they know what they're doing, they can get a lot of kills, and when they get low, they can simply drop back, they can heal up, and then they can go back in and do it all again. When we played with Muselk, I think he had like a 42 kill streak playing with Boba Fett and completely crushed everybody. I played 4 rounds of Battlefront 2, and not once was I able to get my hands on a hero class, even though I had more than enough credits to do that. We did speak to the developers about that, and they explained that they're going to make more heroes available, so more of them will be on the battlefield at once. There'll be a larger roster of heroes, and they're also going to tune the points so that people will be able to access them faster. I don't know what total impact that's going to have, if it's just going to make the game a little bit too crazy, but it's nice to know we'll get our hands on these heroes, because it's certainly one of the biggest reasons that people love playing this game. See, the thing is though, Star Wars Battlefront 2 isn't exactly my kind of game per se, at least not the multiplayer. multiplayer. It's nice and fun, it's casual, I really enjoy playing it, don't get me wrong, but what I'm really excited about with Battlefront 2 is actually the single player mode. Now, details on this are a little bit scarce, but we do know that it's canon, as in it's actually going to be linking episodes 6 to 7. So the gap between when the second Death Star blows up and when The Force Awakens begins, there's a Star Wars story in there and you're playing from the Imperial perspective, which sounds pretty rad to me. DICE have really talked up the single player mode. It doesn't sound like a 2-hour phoned in affair, it sounds like a proper thing. So the fact that that's going in there is actually something that I'm super excited about, because it's been a long time since we've had a proper single player focused Star Wars game coming through that didn't suck. That, plus this significantly improved multiplayer, plus the fact that all the DLC map packs will be free, actually makes this a really attractive package. It's absolutely a must buy for me on day one. I know a lot of people have problems with EA and their business practices, but Titanfall 2 was one of the best and most honest games that's come out in the last few years, being absolutely top shelf exceptional in both single player and multiplayer, and having free DLC. So I'm willing to give EA the benefit of the doubt on this one, especially given how much I enjoyed playing Star Wars Battlefront 2. I will definitely be checking it out when it launches in November, and I really recommend you guys check out the beta when it becomes available. As I said, if you pre-order it, it's out on October 4th. If you don't, then it's out on October 6th. It's available on all platforms as an open beta. Go for your life and have fun. And yeah, I guess may the Force be with you.
Need backup at the throne room. Steady, Captain.